All right, so what we're going to talk about today is building combinations. We're going to start warming up. So the first thing we're going to go over are some of the things that we have to think about when we're coming up with combinations. Now, you can come up with combinations by rote, that's fine. But one of the things that I try to stress to people is you always want to go with the rule of threes as a general starting point. Have 3 combinations to achieve most things. So the 3 easiest punches to land are the 1, 2, and 3, right? Jab's the easiest, straight's the second easiest, lead hook's third easiest. So knowing that, my approach when I encounter a new sparring situation or whatever is I'm trying to figure out what I have to do to be able to land my double jab, which is the most likely to land, what I need to do to be able to land my straight, and how I can use the jabs to lead to the straight and how I can use the straight to lead to the lead hooks. So that's a very general principle or a very general policy that I follow. And that's why I always harp so much on using the 1, 1, 2, 3 combination, because you can break it up and you can do a whole bunch of different stuff. You can do 1, 1, 2, 3, 2. You can do 1, 1, 2. You can do 1, 3, 2. You can do 1, 1, 3. You can do all sorts of different things with just 1, 1, 2, 3, 2. And you can change it a whole bunch of ways. We talked earlier about how you manipulate different parts of the combination or different aspects of the combination to make it do more. You could do that too. So you can turn that one simple combination into a whole bunch of other things. But it's always good to have other combinations too. Sometimes you just want to throw a random one-time lead uppercut at somebody to see how they deal with uppercuts. So you might throw 2 jabs, throw a straight, and then just bring a 5 up real quick to see if they're going to try to block it, if they're going to try to just move their head out of the way, because that's useful information to see how they try to guard against uppercuts. Then you can determine whether or not you want to try to move their elbows, you want to try to hit them in the body to get their arm to move out of the way, you want to see if you want to just use your uppercuts exclusively to their body or exclusively to their head. There's a bunch of different things you can follow out. So this is kind of a little list I made. What are the different things you need to think about when you're trying to come up with your combination? So first and foremost, what are you trying to achieve? What do you if you're taking your first 3 combinations that you're going to use generally over the course of the first round of the fight, what are you trying to achieve? You're trying to see how they move their head? You're trying to see if they integrate their footwork with their head movement? Are you trying to see if they're just one of those people that automatically counters every time? What is your primary objective with your different combinations? Number 2, where are you trying to hit? Are you trying to hit him in the head? Are you trying to hit him on the body? Are you trying to hit him on one side or the other? Are you even trying to hit, or are you just trying to do recon by fire, which is where you throw punches to see how your opponent reacts? Number 3, how many shots can you reasonably land on your opponent? If your opponent's a lot faster than you, it's probably not going to be more than 3 or 4. And that's going to be not even all of those punches are going to land, but you're going to throw 4 of them and then not get it countered. If your opponent's bigger and slower than you, all right, you could probably get away with more. But that's the thing that you also need to consider. All right, how many times can I or do I need to throw this combination? How do I need to change it? Do I need to change it? Can I just throw the same one over and over again because they're not picking up on what I'm putting down? All right, where are they open, right? If their head's open, you're probably going to direct more of those shots towards their head. If their center line's open, you're going to direct them to the body. Another consideration there. How do they like to counter? If you throw your double jab and they catch slip every single time like this, all right, well, there you go. Useful feedback information. That's why we use the double jab, right? It gives you more information than you'll get from other combinations of punches for the least amount of expended energy. What is their strongest shot? So what do they throw the hardest, or what's the one that you have the biggest weakness to? You got to take that into consideration, because if the combination you're trying to put together facilitates their ability to throw that shot, you don't want to use that combination. What is their weakest counter? If you're going to give them something, make sure it's the thing that they're the weakest at. All right, go ahead, jog in place. Which punches need to land the most? So if you're expecting to be able to land somewhere between 3 and 4 punches, out of those, which ones are the most important ones to land to achieve whatever your number 1 primary objective is, right? So you could throw 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you really only care about the 2 and the 4 landing, all right, well, you should probably be moving to the right against an orthodox fighter, if you're an orthodox fighter, to try to get those 2 and 4 shots to land. And then 10, which punch am I most likely to land? Which one's going to be the most likely to hit it's probably going to be a 1, 2, or 3. And if you're not trying to have the definitive punch of the combination be your jab, then it's probably going to be either a straight or it's going to be the lead hook. So which one of those do you want to put in what part of the combination so that you're A, most likely to land it, and B, you're going to get the most effect? Does that all make sense? Yep. All right. So that being said, go ahead and do some jumping jacks. So we're going to put our gloves on. We'll warm up, and then I'm gonna have each of you come up with an objective for what you want to do with a combination, and then we're gonna come up with a couple variations on that combination. Make sense? Yep. All right. All right, so what we came up with, I had 2 or 3 of you were trying to do recon by fire, and then I had one of you trying to specifically test defensive capabilities. Another of you was trying to integrate the movement of your hands with the movement of your feet. Also a good objective. And then, what was your objective again?
Trying to get to my right hand.
Yeah, I was trying to deliver right-sided punches because right side punches were stronger than the left side. All of those are good objectives. So I definitely think we understood the exercise there. Now, I'm not going to demonstrate all of these, but I'm going to at least tell you about some of these so you have an idea. We think of punches as there's 8 to 10 of them, right? You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then you got some variations on straights or hooks, even some variations on uppercuts, and you've got some punches which are kind of nebulously in between, right? Some people will say that an up jab fired like this is an uppercut, which it can be. I mean, it's definitely somewhere between an uppercut and a jab because you're throwing it from here. And then you've got some people that just throw body jabs from here, right? And then you've got other people who bring their hand up and then throw it straight out, right? So how does that affect what your offense does is entirely up to the individual, right? All of those punches none of them are right and none of them are wrong. I teach some and specifically don't teach some because the way I teach other things does not align with how those punches operate. There's always more than one way to skin a cat, and I don't necessarily think one is always better than another, but some of them are more useful more of the time. And that's why I teach the straights that I do. They're the straightest version of those punches you can throw. And if you're trying to achieve the general objectives of straight punches, being able to land a 2 and using a jab to set that up, throwing the straightest version of those punches is the best, right? So, but that being said, there's some other ones. So piston jab is generally the one that I teach. Elbow down, elbows typically pinned to the hip, comes straight out, you turn it over with the wrist and the forearm, and then you bring it right back to the chin. You got a double jab. You got the shell jab, which is the one that comes down here. Ghost jab is also a ghost straight. That's when you throw it with no telegraph and you let the fist move before the rest of the body. And while it's not going to give you the most power and it's not going to be the most mechanically efficient, it's going to be the most likely to land. However, if you're trying to be mechanically efficient over the duration of a round, it's much more important that a jab is likely to land. A straight if it's going to land or when it lands, it needs to have more of an effect because you're going to throw less of them, which is why typically I say to throw the long range 2, because if you're turning and you're sinking your weight down into that punch, you're going to get the most effect for the highest likelihood of landing it versus the jab, which is not a power punch. So again, you have to take the right tool and use it in the right circumstances for the right reason. And a lot of people learn one way to throw a punch and they only do that. And that's why we have such very limited fighters in the world today. All right, triple jab. If your double jab doesn't work, try a triple jab. I know it sounds funny, but it's amazing how just doing something like that, especially if you can vary the cadence of the punches, will help. High-low, that's going head-body, or you got low-high going body-head. You should throw your double jab at different targets anyway. Some people make the mistake of always throwing it at the same spot. Well, if you're wearing headgear, a good spot to throw it is in the pad that goes across the forehead, hit the bottom of that because it lifts the chin. Or you go to the top of the head and then to the chin, or you go chin to the shoulder, or you do whatever, because that way you're gonna figure out which way you throw the punch is the weakest defensive spot for your opponent. Up jab, again, you can throw that from here if you're somebody that likes to fight in the Philly shell. If you have a closed off Philly shell stance, especially where your toes are kind of pointed inward, you can throw it from right here, and you can throw it like an uppercut, or you can throw it like a jab. I don't like throwing that one like a jab. I almost only throw it as like a modified uppercut, just because you can throw it thumb up and you can try to make it a guard breaker too. You can throw a lead overhand from this position. You can throw that shot, and sometimes, particularly if you're fighting a southpaw, if they're a lazy southpaw or they're a southpaw that has a tendency to walk to the inside of your lead foot, it's easy to land that lead overhand while you're pivoting, instead of just trying to throw a hook, which they're going to be more likely to duck under. And then you've got inside cross, which is like somebody's trying to throw a hook and you're like pivoting into it. It's a good idea to throw that inside cross where the elbow is going to help protect by bringing your shoulder up, and you're going to somehow get inside their lead hand. And you got the cash register uppercut from the shell. That's this one we're talking about. But you can make the argument as a modified jab. That's a whole lot of words to say that punches are variable, right? And you can figure out ugly punches that work. I throw an overhand where I dip my head out to the outside way farther than I should, and I just throw it straight up the middle. And you know what? I clock Willie with it, or I used to clock Willie with it all the time, because it just lands so awkwardly. And that's the thing. If it works, it works. And you'll see a lot of, if you watch old fighters, a lot of them look ridiculous the way they throw punches. They never straighten their arms out. They're never mechanically efficient. Hell, the guys are fat and out of shape, and all they did was chop wood and smoke cigars and drink whiskey to train. So, like, you know, whatever works, works. So don't ever forget that. So there's also multiple types of straight. You got the ghost straight, it's where you throw it where there's no telegraph. You got inside straight. You got a guard breaker where you throw it with your hand up. You got the long range one that I typically send. You got a cash register rear uppercut. Bang! You can make the argument that that's a kind of straight because you keep the elbow down and you go to full extension. You got a cutoff. You could throw like the Benny Akita's uppercut, which he throws completely different from how I teach uppercuts, but it works really well for him, and he gets a lot of range because he holds his hands like this and he rolls his hand underneath, and he doesn't squat, but he doesn't have to because the punch comes out at a natural uppercut angle and it has a lot of range on it. So, you know, everybody's bodies are shaped differently too. So it's another thing that you have to take into account for this. Again, I teach the way I teach because it's the most universally or uniformly applicable to the most people. All right, so a couple types of hooks. You've got chip shot hooks, which are like long range, and they come in at an angle like this instead of like this. So instead of coming immediately across the center line, it's a long range shot, one that helps you maintain your distance and move out of the way with. You've got a shovel hook, which is usually kind of initiated like an uppercut, but then it turns over and it mimics this action, which is why it's called a shovel hook, right? You've got a cutoff hook. So people like to throw, which is a rear-handed hook that you throw to the body. It's an 8 that you use to stop their movement to their left. You can throw, there's a cutoff straight that you can throw too, which comes out like this. You turn it all the way over and you hit them with the back of the glove. I like that better because it pushes them back instead of trying to stop them from moving off the angle. You've got a stripper hook, which you use to pull their hand away from their face. You've got like a drop shot, which is where you drop it to the knee, and then you come up around behind the elbow to the back of the liver, right? There's like 5 other hooks, but I ran out of time. So anyway, this is just an example of different types of modifications that you can apply to this process of developing your combinations. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna come up with 3 combinations that are going to support the one that you just did. So if you're maintaining that objective, or if you're trying, you could come up with another one if you want, but we're gonna come up with 3 combinations now that are meant to be used in tandem together as like an exploratory or an objective achieving means. So if you want to use the same objective, you could do that, or if you want to come up with another one, do so. But we're going to do 3 combinations now. All right? Everybody got that? All right, go ahead. All right, so everybody, you did good on the first one, but that was better because everybody kind of, I think, once they had success with their initial construction of a combination, I think making the other 2 was easier, even if you had a kind of nebulous objective. Which brings me to these points, right? So on the very strategic, principled level, when it comes to building combinations, you kind of have to remember these 5 things. First, have multiple generic options, right? Don't just have one combination that you think you're going to use. It's better to have, like, I don't know, I always say the rule of 3s because it's easy to remember and it's easy to be able to maneuver or change those 3 as necessary. But like having a good stable of like 5 or 6 combinations that you just throw because it's all about information collection is a good policy to have. Number 2, don't be dependent on success. If one of your combinations doesn't work, fine, who cares? That's why you have others. Right? But that brings us to number 3, have contingencies, right? People who are like, I'm going to throw this combination, I'm going to knock him out. That's a really dumb approach to have. I don't think anybody actually has that approach, but on the internet, the other day, some guy was like, I just do this, and then I choke them, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that's a really stupid approach. Okay, that's fine. As long as that works in your world, you live your truth, buckaroo. All right, number 4, use every combination to learn about your opponent. At the end of the day, we throw combinations because combinations create more successive success than just throwing individual punches. You're not going to land individual punches. So you throw combinations so you're more likely to land. On top of being more likely to land, you have a greater effect than if you just throw one punch. So, every one of those combinations, whether it works or whether it fails, needs to have contingencies, but either way, regardless of the success or failure status of that combination, you're using every one of those combinations to learn about your opponent. Does that make sense? And lastly, keep it simple. If you think harder before the fight, you don't have to think during the fight, right? You want to take the fight to fight. I know that kind of sounds stupid, but there's a lot of people who will overthink the fight problem while they're in the middle of it. You should do all the thinking in the beginning, have plans and contingencies, because like Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan till they get punched in the face. That's why contingencies are important. It's the same thing in battle. You could come up with the greatest plan ever, right? Patton, like Tyson and Patton actually said a lot of things very similarly to each other. Patton always said, a 70% plan today is better than a 100% plan next week. And he also said everybody has a plan until the first bullet flies. Right? He wasn't mimicking Mike Tyson, but the sentiment is the same. You should have a general plan. You should have I want to try to put him in the corner. I want to pull him out of the center. I want to be able to dominate him in every exchange, right? Because things like that are just universally good regardless of how your skills match up. Because one of you is going to be better at one thing, one of you is going to be better at something else, that's fine. But if you can dominate the exchanges every time you come together, if you could dictate the terms of the engagement, you could dictate the tempo, the location, how it happens, if you could punch first, punch last, and have better quality in between, if you do those things, you're guaranteeing a higher likelihood of success. Does that make sense? All right, so that's why you think before the fight so you can fight during the fight. All right, so now what we're going to do is, because we're still in the middle of Footwork February, is we're going to walk around and do some shadow boxing, and I want you to put some three-dimensional, like, spatial movement to the combinations that you were working on the bag and practice throwing them while you're moving around. If you need to grab some water before that, by all means, go ahead. All right, go ahead.